Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. Our custom to go around the room and share names. My name is Grisha.
I'm Lucky.
My name is Henry.
Lee.
Bob.
Andrea.
Jerry. Stefan.
My name's Ray.
Matthew.
Harold.
I'm Brad.
Tyler.
Susan.
Jack.
Age.
Ron.
Jim.
I'm Steven.
Welcome everyone in person, and then online we have Harley, Jim, Marvin, John, Tyler, Christian, Quentin, Steve, Richard, Don, Jeffrey, Andres, Chris, Briscoe, Titus, and Ron. Welcome everybody online, everybody in person. It's my pleasure to introduce Diego Laura Burges, a lay and trusted Dharma teacher in the Soto Zen tradition. She teaches classes, lectures, and leads retreats in Northern California. Laura received her monastic training at Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, and she co-founded the Sangha and Recovery Program at the San Francisco Zen Center. And Shambhala Publications offers her Buddhist children's books, Buddhist Stories for Kids and Zen for Kids. And her most recent book from Shambhala is The Zen Way of Recovery, an illuminated path out of the darkness of addiction. And Laura lives in San Francisco. I'll give you a second to switch everything over. Okay. Welcome, Laura. Thank you.
Again, good morning, everyone. I'd like to start this morning just by holding in our hearts all of the thousands of beings that are suffering in the wildfires in Los Angeles, and all the plants and animals and land and trees and all the devastation that's happening right now. Thank you for being here today, and thank you also to those of you who are at home. I do want to say that my brother called me this morning to say that our 98-year-old mother, who lives in assisted living, is in the hospital right now with chest pains and a pain in her arm, which may be indicative of a heart attack. And I said to Pete, my impulse is to come right over there, but I'm just about to leave the house to give a Buddhist talk. And he said, it's okay. This has happened before. I can take care of things. We don't even know what's going on yet. At which point I burst into tears and said, Pete, I love you so much. We've had our ups and downs as siblings, as we all do, but he's always had my back. And this morning I was thinking about when I was 8 years old, we were at Boulder Creek. My brother is a diver, and he was a diver. And we have all these home movies of him diving off these rocks into Boulder Creek, We love to play them backwards so that he'd go back up on the rock. But we were there one time, and I was 8, my dad was telling me to go across the parking lot to wash off my legs and feet. And my brother said, Dad, Laura's not a little kid anymore. That's embarrassing. Don't make her do that. And that might have been the first time, I really felt that he stood up for me, and that was, we've been very close friends most of our lives, so, with our ups and downs. So I'm holding my mom in my heart right now, and my brother, and I want to talk about taking refuge in the present moment, because these are such trying times And I was here last week and we talked about, at the beginning of the new year, to think about making mistakes and what kind of intentions we want to have in the new year. With so much confusion and misinformation, the advancing reality of climate change, instead of resting in the present moment, I can find myself thinking, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? So much of our fear and trepidation comes from conjuring up these stories about what might happen, We're living with so many unknowns, and so taking refuge in the present moment is an antidote to that free-floating anxiety that we can feel. Because I had to park a ways away and I was concerned about getting here on time, I called to mind, I've been doing this since I started planning this talk. I said to myself, taking refuge in the present moment. Taking refuge in the present moment. And as I said before, having my mind throughout my body and in my feet. And I got to see these beautiful golden ginkgo leaves on the sidewalk and say hello to some strangers that I ran into. The word refuge comes from the Latin refugio, which actually means to return to. We think of it as fleeing something, but it means to return to. And when we take refuge in the present moment, I feel that we're taking refuge in our own Buddha nature, our own inherent awakening, and that we're taking refuge in the Dharma, which is the vivid truth of what's happening right now, and that also we can take refuge in the Sangha, as we're doing right now with one another, a gathering of people with similar intentions and wishes to be of service in the world. Taking refuge in Sangha is recognizing our deep interconnectedness with one another and with all beings. If you're with us here today, that says that you want to live a spiritual life, a life of practice, stepping onto the path of practice. And this includes dealing with and facing our real lives just as they are right now, whatever's going on, and not avoiding it or pushing it away. And we can do that so much better within the circles of community in which we live. And these things, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, are always with us. They're with us right now as we confront any kind of conflict or difficulty. I do think it's possible to find some kind of ease and equanimity in our lives, no matter what's going on. A kind of balance, a feeling of balance in the midst of uncertainty. So at these difficult times, I find myself refreshed by Buddha's teachings, working with friends in recovery, turning towards the principles of practice, meditating and chanting, following my breath, coming back to this moment, coming back to center, and remembering this folk wisdom of living one day at a time. I walk in the park, I talk to a stranger, I listen to jazz, I'm rereading books that I've loved in the past. And this is a feeling of coming back to myself and coming back to what's important to me. In Buddhism, we step onto the bodhisattva path with the bodhisattva vow. We say we vow to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings, to hear the cries of the world and answer. We have Avalokiteshvara, sometimes depicted as female, sometimes as male, who hears the cries of the world and comes. We know of Tara Buddha. Tara Buddha was born out of a tear from the Buddha. And when you see a statue of her, she has one leg tucked up under the other, but the other on the ground, ready to come and help. And I feel like we are Avalokiteshvara. We are Tara Buddha. Those archetypes act through us as we help one another. Everyone gets hit by some dark thing that comes down the road and knocks a hole in our life when we least expect it. And in this broad sense, we're all recovering from something. Some of us are in recovery from addictive behaviors, but we're all in recovery from the loss of a loved one or from a difficult illness, a family trauma, from the end of a relationship. If we've lost a job, that's a challenge to our identity. This happens also when we retire. Who am I now? Who am I now that I don't teach kids anymore? And all of us from a broken country that's trying to heal. Many of us come to spiritual practice because of a life-changing event. In my own life, a profound experience of impermanence that knocked me off my heels. Everything I thought I could believe in and count on was pulled out from under me. But in that moment of darkness, the deepest darkness, we might see that there is another way to live and that there is some help available to us. Maybe you know people affected by the terrible fires in LA. My sister Betsy and her husband have lost their home and their entire neighborhood. They live in Altadena. Luckily, they were able to leave on time and grab some important things, and they have a place to stay for now. I was talking to my sister on the phone, and she said, I asked her if I could share this with you. The word that's coming to mind for her is discernment. Discernment. What is the most important thing right now? And what can I actually do right now in the midst of this incredible difficulty? And she mentioned living one day at a time and taking care of what she can take care of and helping others. She told me that she's asking for clear seeing of the truth. One of her neighbors, I don't know how he was able to do this, it was a crazy thing to do, went back to their neighborhood and filmed it and shared a film of their home, which had been destroyed. And Betsy's husband, Howard, asked her, do you really want to see these pictures? Do you think that's something you can absorb? And she said, yes, I want to know. I want to know the truth of what's happened. And she told me that as she remembered precious things that she's lost, she feels, my sister's a poet, she feels like she's sipping grief. As these images come to mind, she lost her bass guitar, she's a musician, and her journals of 50 years. She can't comprehend that all in one gulp. And as these images come to mind, she's sipping grief. Right next to that is her incredible gratitude that she and her husband and their son Austin are alive. They saved their dog. They have a place to live. She did joke with my sister. She did joke with my daughter Nova that she regrets leaving behind her hair gel. And I laughed when Nova told me that, and I thought, humor is just an inevitable antidote when we're going through a difficult time. Sipping grief. That makes me think of the AIDS crisis and all that we lost. In Zen practice, we have a ceremony called the Jukai ceremony, where a person formally takes the Buddhist precepts, receives a Buddhist name from their teacher, and they get a bib like this that they've sewn by hand. This precious rakusu, it's called a rakusu, which represents Buddha's robe, was made and given to me by the recovery community. And my teacher has written on the back of it. And in this ceremony, before we take the precepts, we take the 3 refuges. This is a jewel in this ceremony. We recite, I take refuge in Buddha. Now, some people who come into Zen Center and see us doing full prostrations to the Buddha might think we're worshiping this statue. But we are putting ourselves in alignment with the Buddha, and we're recognizing our own inherent awakening, our own Buddha nature. So it isn't a case of even modeling ourselves after this perfect being, but recognizing our own truth, the truth of our own life, and all the missteps and mistakes and joys that have led us to this moment. And in remembering and affirming our own Buddha nature, we realize we're never apart from this awakening, that it's always with us underneath the stresses and chaos of everyday life. We say, I take refuge in Buddha. We say, I take refuge in Dharma. And Dharma is the Buddha's teachings, but it's also just life as it is, things as it is, as Suzuki Roshi liked to say. And Suzuki Roshi spoke his own brand of English, but there's something very poetic for me in him saying, things as it is, which is the oneness of things, and also the multiplicity of things at the same time. And Suzuki Roshi would say, don't be a board-carrying fellow. So if you're carrying a board along, you're not able to see completely. We're not able to see the whole truth if we're carrying a board on our shoulder or wearing blinders. And this is so human of us, to look out for ourselves and to move towards the things we love and push away the things we don't like. And in the Dharma, in studying the Dharma and taking refuge in Buddha, we have access to a much broader way of looking at things. This is what my sister's talking about when she says discernment, to see the whole truth of what's happening to them and many, many other beings. Dharma reminds us that there's a much larger way, a much more open and accepting way of looking at the world and other people. A world far beyond all our likes and dislikes, our prejudices and our narrow-mindedness. The guided meditation that I shared with you, sometimes I've asked people afterwards, what was that like for you? And inevitably, mostly what people say, the hardest thing for them is to say, I accept everyone I know just as they are. And really? Everyone? Just as they are? Really? That's a difficult thing to do. But I think just by saying that out loud, we're more likely to be more open to other people and maybe even forgive someone for something we resent about them. And we say, I take refuge in Sangha. My partner David and I walked around formerly Stowe Lake, now Blue Heron Lake. I love that they renamed that, in Golden Gate Park. Stowe wasn't such a great guy, apparently. And I was talking about the fire and what our family's going through, and Nova said, but Mom, I'm hearing about all these wonderful things that people are doing, donations, food trucks giving food, shelters being opened, people taking care of other people's animals. So important to remember that people can take refuge in Sangha at a time like this. And this is the profound realization that we're not alone, that we have access to this vast lineage of wisdom that goes all the way back to the Buddha, and that we couldn't exist for 1 nanosecond without other beings. We can be grateful to whoever built this beautiful oasis in the middle of the city, an energy that comes to us, the oxygen given to us by the trees. We don't exist as a solitary being for a single instant. This is what is meant by emptiness in Buddhism, that we do not exist as an independent, lonely, suffering human being. We share our suffering with all beings in the world. I love the Desiderata, that prayer that was found in a church. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. These are not easy times, but we also have each other. We can dwell in the serenity of acceptance and courage and wisdom. We can take refuge in the present moment, in our Buddha nature, and in the truth, and in one another. I understand, I'm not a therapist, but I understand that if someone tends to have panic attacks, it's very helpful for them to look down, to see their feet on the ground, and to say to themselves, right now I'm okay. Right now I'm okay. Shakespeare said, it's never the worst as long as you can say this is the worst. One of the first things that struck me, I'm going to go on a little bit longer if you'll forgive me. One of the first things that struck me when I came into the rooms of recovery was the beauty and simplicity of our serenity prayer. And our serenity prayer, which was written by Reinhold Niebuhr in the 1930s, and then was adapted by 12-step groups and used all over the world, a slightly simpler version than the one that he wrote, to help us find equanimity despite our tendency to engage in addictive behavior. That's how we use this prayer in 12-step groups. But it's really for everyone, not just for people in recovery. And Reinhold Niebuhr was a American theologian. And reading up on him, I found out he was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1964. The Serenity Prayer begins with the word God, and I'm lucky that when I came into recovery, I didn't have trouble with that word. I just felt like that word points to a mystery. I think of it as a mystery that I can't understand, rather than fighting with it. I don't believe in a deity outside myself that's pulling the strings and running my life, but I do believe there's a power available to me if I make use of it. If you know the Serenity Prayer, would you say it with me? And we'll include the word God as part of that mystery. So God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you. I need that prayer right now. This prayer, I think, is in perfect alignment with our Buddhist practice and with taking refuge in the present moment, moment after moment. I do appreciate that Angela Davis said she prays for the courage to change the things that she cannot accept. So the Serenity Prayer belongs to all of us, and in this prayer we ask to be granted the serenity to accept things we can't change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Discernment, right? Discernment. So I can't stop the fires myself. I can't stop the earthquake from happening. Did you feel the earthquakes the other day? Yeah, it was weird. Apocalypse, you know. But we can have the courage to look at ourselves and change our own response to things, and to look carefully at what we say and do in the world, and make an effort to be a light in the world instead of an agent of darkness and resentment and hatred. And when we live this way in acceptance and serenity, when we act with courage, having agency to bring social justice to the world and to right the wrongs that we're capable of helping to right, this opens wisdom to us. I think a lot of our suffering, and the Buddha taught us this, comes from expecting things to be different than the way they are. Expecting people to be different, expecting the world to be different than it is. We'll always be easily provoked if we're constantly finding fault with others and with the world, judging, resenting. But when we sit quietly, following our breath, we're practicing acceptance. Just by sitting here and not doing anything, we're practicing acceptance. We're taking refuge in the present moment. We're recognizing, as we sit in silence, especially with one another, the power of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And that we can take refuge in these things, return to our true selves whenever we remind ourselves to do it. I love coming here and speaking to you all. This is a very special place for me. And I haven't mastered this stuff, I come to you because I need to be reminded to refresh my practice day after day. And we don't do it alone. And looking at you and, I am in your body right now. You're in my body right now. We're deeply interconnected, through our 5 senses. So we're deeply connected with one another. And this is how we refresh our practice. Even though we're inherently awake, according to the Buddha. I think that's all I'd like to say today. So thank you for helping me refresh my practice, for sitting with me as I hold my mother, Megan, in my heart, and my brother for taking care of her, and my sister and her husband and their sons when they go through this terrible trauma. And all beings in the 10 directions. You know, each of us sitting here carries our own trauma. We carry our own suffering. But the Buddha had a wonderful image. He said, if you have a bowl of water and you put a cup of salt in it, it will be undrinkable. But if you pour that same cup of salt into a rushing river, it becomes one with the universe and can do no harm. And he was talking about having a little bowl of resentment and judgment and ill will. And we have those things. It's inevitable as human beings. But if we release them into the great river of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we're relieved, you know. And we remind all beings that they too can be relieved from their suffering by sharing it with one another and helping as we can, you know. The Avalokiteshvara has 100 eyes and ears and hands. And those eyes and ears and hands are our eyes and ears and hands. So thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you to all of those of you at home. Take a deep breath together. So we have time now for some responses from you, from people at home, questions, answers, whatever might have come up for you this morning, or whatever you're practicing with these days.
I had I wasn't sure, I mean, I'm new to coming here. I wasn't sure whether what felt like affirmations that you repeated, I wasn't sure whether they were a distraction. I wasn't sure whether, I don't know, because there were so many words, it was hard to know whether it made me take longer to settle.
Yeah. Would you tell us your name?
Harold.
Harold, maybe say your name if you do have a question. Harold, thank you so much for that. You know, I think they can be a distraction, but they can also, they're all words that point us inward.
Right.
You know, they're all words that remind us to come, to take refuge in this moment and in ourselves and in our own awareness and our own courage. So I think I've used this before, this guided meditation, and I think I understand and appreciate your reaction in this instance. But I think if they weren't followed by minutes of reflection and meditation and coming back to our breath, they might feel more like a distraction. So I'm really happy that you said that, because other people may have had the same response. It is a kind of a balance. I often ask myself, should I do this or not? I have found those phrases so helpful to myself. And so sometimes one of them will come to mind. You might try this when you're going through something you don't really want to go through. You might try saying to yourself, I choose to enjoy this moment. I choose to enjoy this conflict that I'm having with my partner right now that seems intractable and that we seem to go through over and over again. I choose to enjoy this moment. And we might find that if we do choose to enjoy this moment, if we do choose to act with courage and integrity, whatever those phrases are, it can enhance or shine up our intention a little bit. So thank you, Harold.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Andrea.
I'm Andrea. Thank you for your talk. I woke up in great grief this morning. My sister has got a really bad diagnosis, and it's plugging into my mom's death and the powerlessness as a nurse, as a sister. And I talked to someone, a fellow in program, and I said, I'm coming here, I'm going to hear exactly what I need to hear. And I did, you know, and I woke up totally not in acceptance, talked to somebody, a fellow in my program, came to acceptance. I couldn't even breathe this morning. And I was up a lot of the night. And I just want to say that talking to that person and coming to this Sangha and sitting and hearing your words, I'm going to enjoy the day. And I'm going to be present here. So thank you.
I'm sorry for that coughing attack. Thank you for sharing that. Andrea's sharing that her sister received a very difficult diagnosis and that it threw Andrea into grief. But in talking to another person and coming here today, she's found some relief and a renewed intention to see the whole picture. And I'm sure that will include, please indulge in memories of your sister as you help her. Enjoy that she's been a part of your life. And look forward to being able to help her through this time. And I think you'll find some solace in that, So, what's your sister's name?
Gail.
Gail. So I'll keep her in mind. Gail. Yes. That'd be great. Thank you. I'm out of tea. Thank you. Come on, there must be something you'd like to say. Yes.
My name's Jerry. Years ago, I was at a 12-step meeting, and they were talking about the Serenity Prayer. And, of course, I've said it a million times. This is going back 40 years ago. And the person who said this, the most important line in the Serenity Prayer is, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that quite hit me because you always think it's grabbing the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can. But the wisdom to know the difference was where does it stop?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Jerry. I think before and maybe even during our practice, we have a tendency to say, well, I can't help that. That's just the way I am. That's just the way I am. And we ask other people to accept us the way we are without noticing that maybe we could do something about some of these tendencies that we have, that might push other people away. So the wisdom to know the difference, the discernment to know what we have control over, what we can affect. And, it's also easy to say, oh, I can't do anything about that. Someone is making a homophobic or racist statement, a misogynistic statement, I can't help that. Yeah, you can. You can find within yourself a kind of compassion for the person who's speaking that way because you don't know what's made them hateful. And say, you know what? And share your feeling with them. So I'm really glad you said that, the discernment of knowing, and not just being superficial about what we can and cannot change, It's been very moving for me to see children stick up for each other. The way my brother stuck up for me. When I didn't want to walk across a parking lot in my underwear, Someone at home?
Yes, Laura, I just want to thank you for being so upfront with what you're dealing with and still being willing to give such a luminous talk. It takes courage, and you're an embodiment of the practice kicking in. When stuff is really rough, you can still be present. So I salute you and thank you for your model.
Thank you so much. Yes, our practice is always here for us, no matter what's going on. Yes, Bob.
Yes. We talk about the wisdom to know the difference. I could conceive in the moment that you don't have the wisdom to be able to tell the difference. Mm-hmm. And if you can have the courage to forgive yourself but that not knowing can be part of the strength you get from the experience, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So Bob is saying to, at times when we don't have the discernment to know the difference between acceptance and action, we can forgive ourselves for that. And in addition, I'd say one of the great gifts of both recovery and practice is that over time we develop, well, Tara Brach calls it the sacred pause. We develop and notice the ability to just pause before we speak or act. And unknown damage has not been done by people who pause before they say whatever pops in their mind. You know, so when we don't know the difference between what we can accept and what we can change, we can also wait. You know, if we don't know what to do, we can wait and we can talk to wise friends and study the Dharma and come deeply within ourselves and meditate and chant and try to find what's true for us. You know, I love the Buddhist teacher Robert Thurman, coincidentally Una Thurman's father, but who teaches theology at Columbia. He's probably retired by now. But I've shared this quote many, many times because this is a foundation of my own practice. He said, meditation isn't just about sitting on a cushion. Meditation is about when we stand up and we're confronted with a choice, we have the radical dharmic freedom to turn in the appropriate direction. So instead of, and he said, instead of responding impulsively, we have the radical dharmic freedom to turn in the appropriate direction. This is that sacred pause that practice gives us. Instead of running around, you know, when I was young and kind of wild, I thought, well, freedom is doing whatever you want and not caring about consequences to me or other people. And I created some damage and got into very dangerous situations because of that. You know, and with some years going by and practice and recovery, I don't always act on my first impulse unless I'm very grounded and feeling that's the right thing. Something else just came to mind, though, which a friend of mine told me. Her father said, never ignore a generous impulse. So you could do that intuitively if you have a tendency, you know, an impulse to do something helpful for someone else. Why wait? You know, you could just do that spontaneously. You know, so there are many, many choices and nuances to this. And we don't always have the wisdom that we'd like to have. But, you know, Andrea said earlier, she woke up just with this feeling of grief. What did she do? She talked to someone else, a person she could trust, about her feelings. And sometimes by saying things out loud, we're relieved, or we also deduce what's the right path for us. Sometimes in talking to another person, the way opens before us, and we know that we're going in the right direction. I'll say, the right direction for now. We have more time. I am going to call on John E. at home.
Hi, hey Laura.
Hi, John.
So great to hear you. And just moved to find your talk. And oops, hold on. Okay. I was also reflecting on this, especially in relation to what's going on in Southern California and that sense of engagement or experiencing with, and at the same time feeling so powerless to know what to do or how to help. And your talk really helped me connect with my own heart and that sense of interconnection, and when I'm in that place, there's just a lot of compassion and anyway, I guess I was just, my question, if I had a question, is about how in the midst of all this very primal, impersonal force of nature, how to face powerlessness and in practice and in the present moment.
Oh, thank you for that question, John. What's incredible is to think, this just happened a few days ago. I mean, it's still happening. But we're very raw, this is very new. And I'm not there right now, but in my own case, John, my mother being in assisted living and being 98, my brother and my sister and I divide up how we can help her. And what my sister does, because she feels helpless in light of my mother's disabilities, increasing disabilities, because she lives in Southern California. But I called my sister, I said, what the thing my sister's taken on is calling my mother every day and seeing how she's doing. Did you have a visitor today? What did you have for lunch? And then I take my mother to her appointments and I keep track of her finances. My brother visits her frequently because he lives near her, takes her on outings, fixes things around her apartment. It's incredibly helpful to have all three of us helping our mother. But I called my sister, I said, would you like me to call Mom to take up that service that you've done of calling her every day? And she said, that would be great, That didn't occur to me till a couple days after they had fled this thing. And so, when I think of Tara Buddha with one foot tucked underneath her and the other on the ground, what I will say is, in our helplessness, be open to rumors in your own mind of what you might do to help. And I think if we're open to what we could do to be of help, ideas will come to us. We'll hear things. We'll find out what we might donate, or we might even be heartened by hearing what other people are doing to help, people who are on the ground. That's how I felt when my daughter Nova was saying, Mom, people with food trucks are going into neighborhoods and, people are, Airbnb is offering people free lodging. And, I think that we can be open to what we might do to help in our helplessness. We might do everything we can do to prevent climate change. One thing that breaks my heart every single day, because I walk a lot in the city, many times a day I see somebody sitting in their car with their engine running, looking at their cell phone. Sometimes they're still doing that when I walk back. Now, of course, what they did was they started their car and then they thought, I want to see if I have any messages. And then they become mesmerized by their cell phone. It makes me feel like we're doomed if we're not even awake enough to what's going on in the environment to use our cars at least as little as possible, Well, I just shared kind of a little judgment But, that's something that I can think of is, could I walk there? Could I not, could I use my car less? Can I plant a tree? What can we do as individuals in terms of climate change? At the same time, it's overwhelming, This is all... There was an article in the New York Times about a man, he was probably a neighbor of my sister. He had been a nuclear physicist and he became a climatologist, or a climate journalist, writing about the climate. And a few years ago, his wife was offered a job in D.C., and he was already thinking, we've got to get out of here. L.A. is way too dry, these winds, so they moved to D.C. And it almost felt a little bit like he's saying, I told you so. But I thought, well, where can you go? You know, you're going to go somewhere where there's hurricanes, tornadoes, rising oceans, pollution, poverty, drought, flooding. There's nowhere to go. We're all in this together, and we all have to do our part. So I do feel, of course we feel helpless in the enormity of what's going on. But Suzuki Roshi said, shine one corner of the world. You may not be able to do anything for the people in LA, but you might be able to do something right here in San Francisco. You know, volunteer at a food bank or donate to Open Hand or Meals on Wheels. It might not seem related to what's going on in LA, but you'll feel like you're doing something for others and not just taking care of numero uno. You know, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you so much. It's meant a lot to me to be with you today. Yeah.
You mentioned something you just said. You labeled it a judgment. Mm-hmm. I would like to offer reframing it as a statement of wisdom.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I feel a lot better about that. So thank you all.
Thank you. Announcements from our hosts and others?
Yes, I'm the host today, and please stay and enjoy the company of the Sangha. There are refreshments and hot water for tea. And when you're done, if the dishwasher says dirty, you can just put your cups in the dishwasher. If not, if they're clean, just put them in the sink and I'll take care of them. I'll be going around with the Dharma ball to accept contributions to cover our expenses. Your generosity is appreciated. Donations in the range of $10 to $20 help Sangha meet its expenses. These include honorarium for our Dharma speakers, rent for this beautiful center, and soon we'll be back doing dinners at the Larkin Street Center for youth services. Also, our quarterly newsletter mailed mostly to people in prison. There's a newcomer sign-up sheet on the credenza if you wish to be included and receive our Sangha membership directory. Please sign up and include contact information you wish to share with the group. Some members go out for lunch after the meeting. Everyone is welcome to join them. The group meets at the front door around 12:30 p.m.
Thank you. Yes.
You might have to help me out with this, but I wanted to remind everybody that registration is now open for our April 5-day retreat at Vajrapani in the Santa Cruz Mountains with Sean Beck Oaks is going to be our teacher, and I don't know what the dates are. I know it's in April.
April 23rd to 27th.
Great.
I have an announcement. I brought in a few of my books, if you're interested. Buddha Stories for Kids, which is the Jataka tales of Buddha's many lifetimes before he became the Buddha. I had a lot of fun writing that. And then my book, The Zen Way of Recovery, which is about the intersection between Buddhist practice and recovery for you if you're in recovery or someone you love. So they used to have this thing called cash. So I don't do Venmo or anything like that, but there's an envelope out there if you happen to have $20 and you want to buy a book.
Also, I'll just put a plug in for being of service to the Sangha. Take refuge in the Sangha and have a deeper connection here. If you want to do some service, we can always use extra hosts who bring snacks and help, tighten things up. We have a position called Zoom Hilda, as we call it, which is to set up all of this equipment. We can train you how to do it, so there's plenty of opportunities to help out if you're interested in stepping up for that. Talk to me or other members of the board. Matthew's actually also doing a lot of volunteering for the mail and answering. We get a lot of requests from prisoners for pen pals and things like that. So if you feel a little bit of generosity bubbling up.
Don't ignore it.
Yeah. All right, so do you have a dedication of merit you'd like to share?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gather around.
Taking a deep breath, we acknowledge our interconnectedness with all beings. We hold in our hearts all those suffering all over the world. May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. And may we dedicate the merit of our practice to all these beings in hopes of greater wisdom and serenity and courage.
Here.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.